celebrated their treble with an open top bus parade through the city centre, with thousands watching on in the rain on Monday. City sealed their first UEFA Champions League title with a 1-0 win over Inter Milan on Saturday, joining Manchester United as the only English teams to secure the Premier League, FA Cup and Champions League titles in the same season. While City went into Saturday's final as massive favourites, success was far from straightforward as Inter made them work to the final whistle. Let's relive the best of the action.
Goodness, that was close. Now a chance maybe. On he goes to Haaland. Haaland's first chance on target, saved by Onana. Now that Akanji leaves it. Oh, he's not going to get there, Ederson. Martinez is through, and Ederson makes his first massive save. Bernardo Silva, how good has he been tonight? Now the chance. Overlap may be, but the cross from Stones is blocked. Foden. Another mazy dribble. City looking to work it to the right-hand side this time. Here's Bernardo Silva. Could he be the man? Not to be. Rodri! 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 At last, City in dreamland. 68th minute. Rodri finds the goal. They were just beginning to wilt into Milan. Got to be careful. Every side is vulnerable. Straight after they score, DiMarco, oh, against the bar, and then DiMarco, and suddenly off the line, and oh my goodness me. Oh, that's brilliant from Foden. Foden to finish. Oh, not to be. Oh, Bernardo Silva's not going to get there. Lukaku, how did that stay out? Corner, last chance. Oh, Ederson was there. Oh, we've survived scares, and there it is! The best team in Europe, maybe the best team of all time. Treble winners, Manchester City. Can you believe it? What a night in Istanbul!
City's win marks Pep Guardiola's third hold on the Champions League trophy, but the first in 12 years, and he's warning that he won't settle for just one at City.
First, when the people will say, Manchester City is already the first Champions League, but I don't want after one Champions League disappear. So we have to work harder next season, and be in there. So there are teams that win the Champions League after 1 or 2 seasons disappear. This is what we have to avoid it. Knowing me, this is not going to happen. But in the same time, I have to admit it is a big relief for the club, for the institution, for everyone have this trophy. Because now, finally, they are not going to ask me about if we are going to win the Champions League or not. So now you have to prepare. So we have time, we have to think about it with next season. And it's an honor for me to be alongside Sir Alex Ferguson in that situation. I have to say I got a message from him this morning in my phone that touched me a lot. So, and it's an honor for me to be with him in this place. It's so nice.
One of our international football analysts, Simon Evans, joins us to discuss City's achievement. Good afternoon, Simon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Moran. I see you're in team colours today as well, yeah?
Well, this is no coincidence, I could tell you that. The moment they won on Saturday, I knew exactly what I was wearing on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great achievement for City. I mean, this is all those Premier Leagues have been fantastic for them. They've been unprecedented in terms of the club's history to have so much success in a short period of time. But this is the one that really seals it for them, that Manchester City are amongst the world's elite clubs.
And I think one of, being a Manchester City fan, every time you'd have debate with other clubs, Simon, there was always that one asterisk that could get you to be quiet. the opponent who you were arguing with would always say, but you don't have a Champions League. So I'm pretty sure everybody else, supporting Manchester City would feel a sigh of relief, just like those players looked when they walked up to that trophy and, of course, gave it a kiss. Pep Guardiola now have gotten that off his back. He no longer has to hear about it. And he's always been spoken highly about as the best manager of all time. Sometimes even he would supersede Alex Ferguson. Does this win end that argument?
Look, I mean, Ferguson won an awful lot over many, many years as well, but I think Guardiola to win championships and the Champions League in Spain with Barcelona, to go to Germany and win with Bayern Munich, even though people could say that's not the toughest task of all, and then to come to England and take a club they've been doing pretty well before he came, but never this level of dominance. You have to look at Guardiola and say he is the greatest, I think. I mean, he will go on and win more things as well, I'm sure. I think, he's got another couple of years at least left at Manchester City. Guardian newspaper in England was saying he'd probably just do the 2 years that's left on his contract. We'll see about that. But I think he'll go on to win this competition again. And then what will he do after that? We'll see. But I imagine Pep Guardiola, he's an obsessive. He's so enthusiastic and committed to everything. I can't see him retiring in his 50s and taking it easy and, just sitting back and looking at all his achievements. He's going to go on and do many, many more things.
Exactly, and I mean, he still has it in him, so why not? I think he's at the peak of his managerial career, if I'm to say so myself. But I want to spend some time talking, Simon, about Inter Milan. And being the analyst that I am, I'd never want to come across bias. Inter Milan, there were moments in that game that I felt as if City was going to lose this again.
Yeah, I mean, the first half they set themselves up so well, Inter Milan, to frustrate in a lot of ways Manchester City. Certainly didn't allow them to get into their normal rhythm. I think the way they set up was really effective to that, and so a lot of credit needs to be given while we're talking about Pep Guardiola, for the way Simone Inzaghi took a team that hasn't been one of Europe's elite for the last few years and was able to perform at that level in a final. And then after the goal, when they went pushing for an equaliser, as we saw there on the highlights, they came very close on a number of times. So I think Inter Milan did a lot better than some people who were expecting them just to be a pushover would have envisaged. And I think it's a really creditable performance from them this season. I think City are the best team. I think they deserved it. But Inter Milan, we need to take our hat off to them as well.
Yeah, we certainly need to, Simon. Tactically, I thought they were brilliant. And even when you look at some statistical aspects of the game, Inter Milan, 14 shots to Manchester City's 7. They had more shots on target as well, 6-4. And the stat that really jumped out at me in terms of the big chances missed, Inter Milan with 4 big chances missed, and Manchester City with 2 big chances missed. And you look at the back end of that game, the last 20 minutes, and you think to yourself, if Inter had taken their opportunities, certainly the last one that fell to Romelu Lukaku with the goal at his mercy and somehow finding the leg of Edison, then we could be having a completely different discussion today. But I just want to go back quickly to the Pep Guardiola discussion as we're having a look at Romelu Lukaku. But I quickly want to go back to the Pep Guardiola discussion, and I want to look at John Stones, because I watched that final on Saturday and I felt like I was seeing the evolution of John Stones come to a point where I was like, wow, is this the John Stones that came to Manchester City? And I'm thinking to myself, this probably is the perfect representation of how good Pep Guardiola is as a manager. One of the questions I've always asked when the discussion comes up about whether Pep is the greatest of all time, does he make his players better? I want to get your opinion on John Stones, just how good he was on Saturday, especially in the second half, the ease in which he was on the ball, some of those passes into the attacking third that he made as well, and just a quick chat about how well Pep Guardiola has done to get this man to what he is today.
Yeah, I think one of the fascinating things about it is that John Stones signed for Manchester City in the season before Guardiola arrived at the club. And the information that came out was that Guardiola knew he was going to City at that time. He was leaving Bayern Munich and he was going to Manchester City, and said, sign that guy for me. I want him at the club when I arrive. And City did that. And look, John Stones was always a footballing centre-half, as they would say in England. He was always a player who liked to play it out and could pass the ball when he was playing at Everton and even before that at Barnsley. But to his evolution this year, where Guardiola used last year Cancelo, the fullback, João Cancelo, and asked him to go into the midfield. And then, as we know, there was a fallout with Cancelo. He's moved on. And he asked Stones to go in there and do it, and instantly he looked comfortable in that role. But every game he's got better and better, and I totally agree with you. In the final he was outstanding, actually playing as a right back then and going into midfield into those positions. So the flexibility he shows, the technique, his passing ability. I mean, he really, you start to think about some of the great names of the past when you see the way Stones, the level of comfort he has on the ball. And you're absolutely right, Pep Guardiola does make players better. Some players can't handle him and they don't get better with him and they leave the club very quickly. But if you work with Pep Guardiola, you listen to him, you take on board what he's saying, you'll become a better footballer for sure.
Yeah, and when you think about how Stones would have taken that game on in the second half, it was a point of the game where it easily could have gone the other way. We spoke about the chances that Inter Milan would have had. And I guess also as well, you have to give Inter a lot of credit, certainly coach Inzaghi a lot of credit for how he set up that medium block, maybe not putting 2 or 3 men on this great forward Erling Haaland, and they frustrated City.
Well, they did. I mean, City, we've seen teams week after week in the Premier League come and have a low block or a medium block and try get men behind the ball and frustrate them, and they still end up conceding 3 or 4 goals, or if they don't, they concede, a dozen chances. Inter Milan, really, Haaland, was not a factor in the game for long stretches. He hardly had, apart from that early opportunity, he hardly had any chances, really. And this was it. This was the one chance, really, that Haaland had very early in the game. But to do that means not just watching Haaland. It means cutting out City's source, and often that's De Bruyne or Gundogan. And Inter did a really good job on that. They're smart at that. The Italian coaches have still got it when it comes to setting up a team, but they just didn't really have enough firepower for them. They didn't have that. If they'd have had a Haaland or someone up front, they could have been a very different game.
If you were Inter Milan, if you were the Inter Milan manager, how disappointed would you be? Forget about the build-up. Forget about what the expectations were. How disappointed would you be when the final whistle sounded and you were not at least going to extra time?
I think the frustration would be that when they really had to go and attack, but they were a goal down, suddenly we saw City wobbling. Suddenly we saw opportunities opening up. And as a coach, I think the frustration might be, if we'd have come out at half-time, I'm not saying first half go out and attack Manchester City like that. They played it very well. But if they'd have come out after half-time and said, right, okay, we've got them to 0-0. Let's go and put some pressure on them. Let's see what they're made of. Let's see if they can cope with us at the back. They didn't really do that until they went a goal behind and then ran out of time, really.
A word on Romelu Lukaku, because I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this in the World Cup. We saw it a few times elsewhere. It's, the chances come. He's not effective off the bench very often, is he? He's a player who, if he comes in cold into a game, the chances will come and you think he's got to bury that. They weren't easy chances, but, it's just... Lukaku's career's just gone off the rails a little bit, hasn't it? That move back to Chelsea. If he'd have stayed at Inter Milan, rather than going back to Chelsea and coming back, you wonder what kind of player he'd be now at this stage in his career. But he does seem to have lost that edge a little bit.
Yeah, definitely has lost the edge, and of course has lost a lot of his fans and supporters because they're so disappointed with him. Now this Manchester City treble, where does it rank when compared to Manchester United's treble?
Well, I've seen an argument in England over the last couple of days which has said that United's was more of an achievement because the Premier League was more difficult to win for them at that time than it was for City. I don't know if you could say that. City have maybe made it look easy, but they were pushed pretty hard by Arsenal this year. I think it's very difficult to choose between the two.
Right, and Simon, what I always felt is that City is always compared to their own standards. Everybody judged City by how City has performed previously. I think that has gone against them when it comes to that debate, because City has been so good where the EPL is concerned. It's as if they are expected to win. And I was listening to Pep Guardiola at the end of one of the conferences, and he was saying, now people will expect me to win the treble every year.
They will as well. You know, next year, I think, you know, if City struggle in the Champions League or get off to a poor start in the Premier League, the people will be asking questions again. Of course they will. And they will expect that. And they've spent a lot of money. There's no getting away from that. Some people are making a lot more of that than I think is fair. But, you know, if you look at other clubs, other clubs have spent lots of money as well, like Paris Saint-Germain, and not got anywhere near to this kind of success in Europe. So there will be expectations for him to go out there and do it again. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he does.
Yeah, two players I want to touch on before we leave you. Kevin De Bruyne, it's as if Champions League, you know, he's cursed. He can never get to play the Champions League. Even when he comes on, he has to come off. So him, and then Ilkay Gundogan, his future, Simon, where Manchester City is concerned.
Yeah, a lot of speculation about Gundogan with Barcelona, and also possibly becoming one of the players that's moving for the mega bucks in Saudi Arabia, which I think, you know, Gundogan is such an enjoyable player to watch. He's done so well this season for City. You know, he has seasons where he maybe doesn't capture the attention, but he always has these moments, a couple of months where he's absolutely the top player in City's team and wins games for them and so on. So he'd be a big loss for City if he were to leave. I hope he doesn't, actually, because, you know, people can do what they want in their careers and so on, but I don't think he's reached that stage where he needs to be heading off into the sunset. And you know, the other player we were talking about was
Kevin De Bruyne.
De Bruyne, yeah, I mean, so unlucky with injuries in 2 finals now. Yeah, but over the season, his contribution, over the whole Guardiola era, his contribution, you know, I've said it before on this show that I think he's the best player in the world in his position. He really can do many, many things, and we saw great goals from him in the Champions League this year. And when he went off, I started thinking, you know, is this going to be another of those City finals like the one against Chelsea where they struggle and then De Bruyne gets an injury and they have to change things around? But it wasn't that unfortunate ending. Just a little bit sad for De Bruyne that he had to go off.
You know, Simon, I was having this discussion on Saturday before the Champions League final, talking about Kevin De Bruyne, and we were talking about big matches outside of the English Premier League where you can say that Kevin De Bruyne left his mark on that game and was the difference for Manchester City, not just in terms of scoring a brilliant goal, but bossing a massive game. Can you think about any of those? And if you can't, what does it take away from Kevin De Bruyne that he really doesn't have his stamp on a massive game in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at Champions League games like they ended up losing the series last year against Real Madrid, but Kevin De Bruyne was fantastic at times in those games. Certainly stamped his authority on Champions League games in the knockout stages over the last 3 or 4 years. So I think he has done it. It's an unfortunate coincidence for him that he gets injured in 2 finals. Maybe, you know, he's so important to the team that they've pushed him out there when he's not 100% fit, and that's the price you pay for it. But he's a fantastic footballer, and I think with Belgium it's a different story. The Belgium team hasn't lived up to expectations, but I think, you know, he's almost been trying to carry them towards a title, really. I think Kevin De Bruyne, what he's done in big games in the Premier League and in the Champions League speaks for itself, really.
All right, Simon. Well, as usual, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining us. And the celebrations continue throughout the week.
Yes, indeed, and raining in Manchester on the parade, well, that's kind of appropriate for Manchester, I think.
Yeah, I like to think it's blessings. So we'll talk again soon.
All right, all the best.
Simon Evans there, our international football correspondent. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we have more football to talk about. Stay with SportsMax on YouTube and follow us on all social pages for updates, news and entertainment.